Okay, you read the title and you probably think I'm weird. Well,
you have no idea.
But in this case, at least, I am completely justified, and today I'm gonna prove it. This is why weak-ass villains scare the shit out of me, exactly like they're supposed to be doing. I do a series analyzing overpowered anime characters done right, so I really needed to cover this topic, and you can expect a sequel to this within a week covering why most overpowered villains are boring, so feel free to subscribe if you have any interest in that. But a truly great serious villain or antagonist in any story needs an air of menace. There needs to be that tangible curtain of dread looming above the heads of the protagonists and the viewers, where we can fill their bone-chilling persona by their very presence, and one of the least important benefactors to give off all that effect is actual power. People unfortunately often perceive strength as the all-encompassing aspect of what makes a villain terrifying.
Holy shit, did we see Madara wreck all 5 Kage at once?
I did an OP analysis on Madara to get the point across that the amazing moment of his battle with the Kage that hyped his character to the extreme was not epic just because he's so strong, but it's because of how the series hyped him until that point. But again, I'll be covering this in more detail in the sequel to this video, so no need to take my upcoming points as a slight against powerhouse villains because they're getting their personal Nux treatment. I want to only focus here on the brilliant villains that are brilliant in their writing without having to rely on this so-called crutch being power. I'll be splitting this topic of physically unimpressive antagonists into 2 defining categories. First, the battle fantasy shonen setting, and secondly, the thriller drama setting. First group, battle shonen anime in the vast majority of scenarios place you, as the viewers, directly into the perspective of the main characters who seek growth. And it's this growth that will eventually bring you to the world's pinnacle, where the series can finally meet its end. Because of this, fighting a villain powerhouse at the story's climax is kind of inevitable, and that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. But then again, for the most part, the story's not exhilarating to see if Naruto becomes the Hokage. We want to see his journey to become Hokage. So, when Taku said in episode 1 of My Hero Academia,
"Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that this is the story of how I became the world's greatest..."
Spoilers, man! God, why even watch this anymore? As I was saying, that's not the point here, and that's not a spoiler. If I'd make a One Piece theory video that Luffy actually finds the One Piece, what? Yeah, it wouldn't be a very impressive theory. Unlike if I made a theory on the entire climax of One Piece, because that's kind of what we're really watching for. We know he's gonna become the Pirate King. Theory video on the One Piece climax on the way, by the way. But now that we have the battle shonen perspective in mind, let's take a look at 2 of my all-time favorite villains in shonen. And while, yeah, I guess they're pretty powerful in their own universe, if we're scaling brute power, they're fodder. The first being Stain from My Hero Academia, and the second being Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. I could spend hours talking about how much I love these guys, but let's focus on why they're absolutely terrifyingly brilliant, and for totally opposite reasons from one another. Stain is a character with an undeniably powerful ideology that drives his actions forward to the point that he can almost be viewed as an anti-villain. To be clear, I said almost, because I've seen him called an anti-hero fairly often on YouTube as well as other forums, and that is undeniably false. He's killing the innocent, and he is very much a villain, but his philosophy and twisted ideology were beautiful, because how his villainous actions were actually put in question as far as what justice really means. I don't get upset that there's this debate in the anime community if he's a villain or an anti-hero. The short answer is he's a villain, but the fact that this debate was even risen proves how brilliant of a villain he actually was, and how the reality of his motives were impressed into the mind of the viewers, let alone the impressionable characters in the actual series. When Stain took his bandage mask thing off his face and bellowed at Endeavor, it made him a real entity. It wasn't only the heroes before him that felt his convictions sharp as daggers, but it was the entire MHA fanbase collectively holding their breath. We so clearly understood Stain's mindset, and how a mindset of that fashion can naturally occur in even our real world. Stain's quirk was that whoever's blood he licks, that person becomes paralyzed, and the way he draws their blood is with his array of blades. Technically, if those blades were doused in poison and he had no quirk, he'd arguably be just as powerful, if not even more powerful, because the poison wouldn't have a time limit or other limitations his quirk actually possesses. Aside from that, he's extremely fit. Add that to his cunning, and he can them with frightening accuracy, lower individual pro heroes one by one to their demise. Stain is by no means a powerhouse, to the point that he'd lose to Deku, a first-year high school student one-on-one where we are right now in the manga. However, as a domino effect from his narrative, his infectious, righteous-ish ideology spawned masses of villains globally who can twist his words to fit their perversions of reality. Going into more detail of this would be spoilers for the anime, so I will not be continuing, but one, you should understand the intent I have regarding a terrifying, physically weaker villain, and two, you can see why I want to give this guy his own video in the future. Stain was around for 3 episodes. His stay was awfully brief. His effect on the entire MHA universe was massively vast, and the ideology that he embodied to his core was terrifyingly real. The reasons why I want to contrast him with Hisoka are simple. 1, they're both incredible villains. 2, they're both not OP by any means. Not to say either of them are wimps, obviously, but in the scope of their narrative, they are not even near the top of the power scaling scale. And 3, they both play complete opposite roles in their respective story, so I can encompass a broader spectrum of not OP villains done amazingly, and that scare the living crap out of me. They are both brilliantly crafted, terrifying villains. Hisoka, unlike Stain, has absolutely zero ideological or philosophical value that I can get behind or that relates to our world on an intellectual level. So, if I had to state his ultimate factors that made him an amazing antagonist, it's his sheer omnipresence, his tenacity, and his unpredictability. The combination of these 3 vital aspects makes him a constant existing fear of what will transpire. Like Stain, he's far from the strongest character in the series. The Chimera and Royal Guards and the King would obliterate him in a heartbeat, as would Netero and the elite Zoldix. If we're talking pure power levels, Hisoka's really not all that impressive. He can ejaculate sticky, stretchy goop from his fingers, and that's basically it. And he also has a passion to fight strong opponents. Not a great combo there, pal. But despite all this, Hisoka's unorthodox fighting style, getting in the mind of his adversary, and pulling a million strings, sometimes literally, behind the scenes, make all of his fights freaking incredible. For example, and you'll like this one, his first real fight in the series was against Castro. Spoilers! Hisoka won. Spoilers again! Castro's way stronger than Hisoka was, but his mind was being entirely manipulated, not with magic powers, but with psychology, since before he even stepped foot on the stage to battle. This is the first time we're actually seeing Hisoka in a real fight, in front of real spectators, and this is the first time we're seeing how Hisoka's mind works on the battlefield. It's a glossed over, incredibly important fight, but Hisoka gets what he wants, and he always gets what he wants. Despite the odds being against him, okay, he'll just fool the entire Phantom Troop, no big deal. Okay, so he'll ally up with the good guys for now, you know, playing dodgeball or something. You don't know what Hisoka wants, but he'll still get it. And since his goals never directly clash with the protagonists, our boys, the MCs, are still breathing, otherwise they probably wouldn't be, at just Hisoka's mere whim. So, Hisoka's always around, somewhere in the shadows, following his own set of rules, and that makes Hisoka simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. He has no allegiances, and he therefore cannot be trusted by anyone. Funnily enough, though, he's always in a situation where someone just has to trust him. Yeah, weak villains are the ones that usually get my heart racing, because no writer can use their strength as their motive or personality. Stain and Hisoka are my personal favorite antagonists from their respective series as far as great villains. Though, yeah, Hunter does have Crollo, Meruem, and Poof, who are incredible on their own right, but they're a bit too powerful to prove the point I'm trying to get across, and I still like Hisoka more. Poof will be getting his own video on my channel, for sure. Criminally underrated by the fans. He's a sick freaking character. And as far as My Hero Academia for great villains, so far in the anime, we only really saw Stain and Mineta. But yeah, I'm not including Mineta in this video because, again, way too overpowered to get my point across. Notice I didn't really spoil anything about either of these villains if you haven't watched that respective series, so if you haven't, definitely check it out. And this is a good time to mention, I did not talk about a certain villain from part 4 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure because, unfortunately, most of you probably have not watched it, and you definitely should. He's one of the greatest villains in all of anime. JoJo's isn't just muscle hentai, okay? And now we get to move to category 2. Villains that are either in thrillers or dramas or a combo, and why they're usually, note usually, done better than battle fantasy shonens. And it's actually really simple. It's because when we're watching a battle fantasy shonen, we're watching for fights or whatever it is. When we're watching a drama thriller, it is not a dick measuring competition where it's about bigger explosions, at least not in any good drama. For the most part, a good thriller isn't getting your blood pumping by cool fight scenes or main characters trying to become the ninja, pirate, wizard, hero, president. Not that that's a bad thing or anything, but it does leave an opening for villains just having the motive of, I will take over the world, and just result in making them crazy powerful without any actual motive behind their power. Now, if you look at villains in anime like, let's say, Kaiji or Death Note. Now, drama thrillers for the most part do not have the must take over the world story, but it's a story focused on the ideology and psychology of the characters and the philosophy behind their actions. So, being that the focus is already not on Kamehamehas, we end up with a better good villain average, being that by default they need to have a personality, motive, and ideology, and just being mad OPAF cannot be used as a crutch this time, whereas in the unfortunate majority of battle shonens, the main arc villain, or unfortunately sometimes the main villain of the entire story, have none of that and are evil because they're evil. And that unfortunately is freaking everywhere. Kaguya from Naruto, Kayaba from Sword Art Online, and almost every arc final boss in Fairy Tail, except for possibly Acnologia, discussion for another day, peeps. And that's just a few examples. They're strong, they possess the power, the writers therefore deem it acceptable to not build them past
me strong, me take over world, me squash good guys.
Because that's the bare bones minimum required to drive and progress a battle shonen story forward. If I find myself not liking a villain, this is usually the reasoning. So I begin to question to myself every time a new villain is introduced, so does the writer think that being overpowered is a personality trait or is it just a stat? I am gonna get working on part 2, talking about the fine line between an overpowered badass and an overpowered crybaby. But before that, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Shin Sekai Yori. The reason why I didn't talk about this anime in either of the two categories thus far is because I have a sneaking suspicion that most of you have not watched it, being that it came out in 2012 and didn't get the hype treatment of, say, My Hero Academia, because it's a much more mature anime. Shin Sekai Yori, or From the New World, if you're up for it, is probably the philosophically deepest anime I've ever seen, and probably my favorite psychological anime of all time. Okay, I don't mean to scare you here. It's not like horror porn or something like that. Oh god, I hope that's not actually a thing. It's totally a thing. But anyway, it's just not a shonen. I mentioned this here, very much on topic also, because in the series' second half,
It's only 24 episodes total, never fear.
it has the perfect, and I mean perfect, display of what I mean by brilliantly written, weak, puny-ass villain scaring the living shit out of you, and ideologically being in the right just as much as the alleged good guys. If you, by miracle, did watch it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and if not, and you're into that kind of thing, I highly recommend Shin Sekai Yori or From the New World. You will not be disappointed. But to end off, let's reiterate that first point I made. Now, with actual context, I've been expressing throughout the video being overpowered is a stat, not a characteristic. That's why you can have epic weaker villains, and you can have pathetic, boring, stronger villains. A character needs well-based characteristics before you can worry about stats, and that is what all too many people seem to get wrong. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked, please leave a like, and if you want more, feel free to subscribble and hit that bell, cause YouTube actually does its job with the bell on. At least, that's what they say. I'm not buying it, but that's what they say. Link to my Twitter and merch also in the description, as well as my new Patreon. Speaking of, thanks so much to the fanbase that supports me there, including the 3 swag coggers, you, Colton Scott, and someone who doesn't want me to announce their name. You know who you are. We have 1 Lord Tweeger, Galactic, and 2 God Usopp rank, Ezedric, and JD Fincher. It is extremely appreciated. Any donors, no matter the amount, have access to my Discord server. Let me know what future videos you want in the comments, be it analysis or satire. Yeah, we're different here. I do both. And as you know, I do try to read the comments. I love you guys. Stay weird, fam.